How do you think President Obama and Governor Romney are being represented to the media, and ultimately, how is the American public receiving them?
Well, of course, so much of the media representation is through advertising these days. And both of them have chosen to kind of go on the attack against the other one. So you don't have so much advertising now that tries to tell people who they are. The advertising tries to tell you who the other guy is. So the result is it's all pretty negative. And Obama is trying to convince people that the other candidate doesn't have the economic wherewithal, and Governor Romney is not as good at bringing back the economy as he says he is. And of course, Governor Romney wants to emphasize the fact that so many things that Mr. Obama has tried have failed, and that the economy is still bad, and unemployment is bad, and so forth. So those are all negative things, and we haven't seen much of the good side about either of these candidates yet. And I think at some point they will have to focus on what's good about themselves.
Yes, definitely.
But that's pretty hard to do if you're an incumbent and things have not been going well.
My question is in following along the same lines. The most recent news items are about Obama's unrelenting attacks on Romney's previous tax records, rumors of outsourcing jobs, and rumored private offshore accounts in Switzerland and the Cayman Islands. What are your opinions about these accusations and about negative campaigning?
Well, I think they're really difficult because the idea of negative campaigning is not so bad. I mean, you historically always had to tell what's wrong with the other guy or why you're better than the other guy. But when you reach the point where you're not telling the truth about people, you're making things up, is really difficult because there's no way to get the truth back. If you go on television ad and say something about somebody that's just not right, it may or may not ever get straightened out. And so I think it's very unfortunate. But you know, President Obama has got so many negatives with the economy and the way things have worked, and particularly his lack of a spending program, that he has got, or feels like he has to take the nation's focus off of the economy. And the only way to do that really is to make charges against the opponent. And Romney, for example, he has to fight the negative ads of Obama, and his people are saying, well, the only way to do that is to go negative on him. So if you don't fight negative advertising with "I'm a good guy" stuff, you have to go after the other guy. So the result is that we're in this kind of whirlwind circular firing squad thing where there doesn't seem to be any way out.
Yeah, excellent. A main criticism of Robert Gibbs was that he was too close to President Obama, and that kind of made him lose sight of his objectives. So can a press secretary ever become too close to the president and cross the line of professionalism and personal life?
Well, I don't think you can ever be too close to a president. I mean, I think that's a mistaken criticism of Gibbs. Because the closer you are to the president, the better you know what he's thinking, what he's doing, and so forth. On the other hand, you can be very close to the president and still characterize him incorrectly or still be harmful. I always remember once Jody Powell, who was very close to his president, Jimmy Carter. In fact, Jimmy Carter started running for president by driving his own car through backwoods of Georgia, and Jody Powell would ride with him. So they knew each other very well. Well, one time Jimmy Carter went fishing, and while he was out in his fishing boat, a rabbit swam out to the boat, and Jimmy Carter hit him with his paddle. And Jody thought that would be really clever. Well, only Jody knew this. So if Jody didn't tell this story, nobody would know it. But he did. He thought it would be clever. So he told the story of President Carter hitting the rabbit with his paddle. Well, it all worked against him. I mean, people thought the president was mean. He was tough. He picked on rabbits. He was scared of a rabbit. He couldn't go fishing without getting attacked by the killer rabbit, and it was all a disaster. But that wasn't because he knew Jimmy Carter too well. It's because he used bad judgment and whether or not he should say anything. And I think that's the way it is with Gibbs. The problem is not that he knew Obama well. It's just that he then used bad judgment, or he let his anger get the best of him. He would get mad and misrepresent the president, and I think that's probably why they had to move him out.
Very true.
Okay, the Republican Party has been criticized by the media for spending too much time attacking inner party members instead of focusing on President Obama's past records and mistakes. Do you think this is accurate to say?
Well, I find that a little strange, and only in the sense that I don't know who Romney has been attacking on that. I haven't seen many attacks on inter-party members. They do want him to focus on the president. And the Republicans want to deal with the president badly, and they think that he's getting away with things. So I understand the point of that, but he is getting much tougher also. Just within the last week, he had accused President Obama of lying about his taxes and several of those issues. So, but I don't know exactly why his advisors are upset, because I think Romney's getting pretty tough.
Very good. So President Obama, throughout his campaign, hasn't been very camera shy at all, and he's always addressing the media and the public. Mm-hmm. He doesn't seem to be using his press secretary, though, as much as past presidents have been seen using their press secretaries. So do you think that this is true, and is it a disadvantage or an advantage for his campaign?
Well, I think it has been a weakness or a fault that doesn't help him. But it's not clear to me that his press secretary, Jay Carney, has the access or the ability to help him in ways that he could be. For example, Carney talks about, he reemphasized what the president says and does, but he spends very little time in trying to speak for the government, for the broader issues. You almost never hear him talk about foreign policy or about Korea or Iran or what's going on there. He leaves that all to the State Department. So I think his press secretary could be helping him more, but I'm just not sure he's up for it.
So in comparison between when you were working now and then, do you think that maybe things communication-wise might be going a little more, they were more smooth back then than they are now?
Well, they were different. The media was different. For example, 20 years ago, we didn't have blogs, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have this horde of news media from every source on top of every issue and requiring instantaneous answers. And so it was a lot easier back then. And similarly, the press that were covering the president were more interested in good government as well. And now it's all about the politics of it. And it's all about the soundbite on who's up and who's down and who's shot John. So it's a different dialogue today than it was 20 years ago. Now, I don't really know how that started. In some ways, Tony Snow was George Bush's press secretary at one point, and he was a very aggressive kind of advocate for political advocate for Bush. And he kind of started that form of being press secretary. Well, then he died. Bob Gibbs came in, and Bob Gibbs was also very political. He'd been with Obama a long time. Politics was his game. He didn't much care what the government was doing. He only cared about getting his guy reelected. So he was very political. All of that made the whole argument more difficult because it became more spiteful, more hateful, more aimed at tearing down the other guy. So you could say, well, if those two guys hadn't been there, would it have happened? It might have happened anyway, because you can see what's happened on cable television, for example. If they have a Republican conservative, they want on the same panel, on the same table, a liberal Democrat. So they can say to people, look, we gave them both equal time. We're fair, because they know that people are going to attack each other. So then you have this ugly kind of attack journalism in which the candidates or their surrogates, their representatives, are always calling each other names and make almost no substantive kinds of efforts at it. I don't know how to change that. I tend to think that the only way all of that will change, the attitude and the tenor of the media and deal, is through whoever the elected president is. The president really has all the power, far more than the incumbent or the challenger or the media does. He controls the foghorn, and if he decides, I am not going to be mean and nasty or thin-skinned about this, that'll lower the level for everybody. But until that happens, it's going to be tough. And the last 3 presidents we've had didn't want that to happen. President Clinton, President Bush, and President Obama have all been really tough guys who were so political that it drowned out rational discussion.
Do you think that it could also be an advantage for President Obama if he's the one that the media is constantly seeing and he's open and he's a common face?
Well, he thinks it is. He thinks it is. But if people hate him because of it, it won't.
Yeah, true.
So there's a risk there. And people generally don't like to see that kind of animosity. And they generally, also people tend to believe, as we have believed historically, that presidents are presidents of all the people. Even if they only win by 1 vote, one person gets 1 vote in America, and if one person gets 1 more than the other one, the majority wins. Well, that also requires that a president at least maintain the position that he represents the losers as well as the winners. Because that's the only way that works. If you're a voter, you're the American people, and you've got to accept somebody else winning by 1 vote that's not your party, not your guy. You got to at least think that fellow is going to be president of all the people. And the last couple presidents have made it pretty clear that they're only going to be the president of those who support him. In President Obama's first State of the Union message, he said, I know a lot of you disagree with me on health care, and if you want to criticize me, I will call you out. And I've never heard a president say that in history. Basically what he's saying is, everybody in the country who doesn't agree with me on health care is the enemy. You're not on my team. I don't care about you got people. And that goes against the whole idea that the president is the president of all the people. And I think that's a very dangerous principle to lose by any president.
Well, that's all the time we have right now, and that's
all
all
right.
the questions. Thank you so much for your time and
You're
for
welcome.
answering the questions.
Yes, thank you.
It was
You're
very
welcome.
enjoyable. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Great to talk.
Thank you.
Ah.
Good.